Hello, I'm Richard Brent, the editor-in-chief of Briefing magazine, which we believe here is the publication for the work and worlds of legal business leaders like yourselves seeking practical solutions for smarter business management. That's our strapline. We're discussing leveraging data insight at firms to best effect, whether for improving client service or for internal process improvement. And this is something that we know continues to be very topical with our readers, whether they're in some cases perhaps exploring data as a potential new revenue stream, or otherwise simply probably in inverted commas there, trying to help people work more productively as individuals or teams, wherever they happen to be logging on from today. They're depending on data to develop and win more profitable work, to form closer client relationships, and plenty more besides. On the other hand, if insight-rich repositories of data continue to be the new oil for firms, they don't want to find themselves drowning in it, as somebody recently remarked, can all too easily be the case without a very solid strategy in place. A reminder before we get into, I do my introductions to my guests, that this hour session is being recorded and distributed later. And there is time specifically allotted for questions for the speakers at the end, but you can also ask questions anytime here in the Q&A, and I will raise them in due course. Okay, well, without further ado, I'd like to introduce my guests. My first is Bob Hetherington, who is a partner at the law firm Weightmans. He was the head of local government litigation before he became head of management information in 2010. As head of management information, he is responsible for provision of business intelligence and management information, of course, to the firm's clients, which includes liaising with clients on market analysis, provision of key performance statistics, risk management, and other advice around data management and delivery, but also the production of internal management reports for strategic decision-making and continuous internal improvement. From a very different firm, but experiencing some similar challenges, we've also got Sadie Baron, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at Reed Smith, part of the top leadership team, of course, and responsible for strategic projects concerning client engagement and business development and much more besides, and relying on plenty of data to do all of that. Sadie was also, was previously rather, also head of marketing at Eversheds. And I'm delighted that we're also joined for the discussion by leading client relationship management platform Salesforce, recently the subject of a marketing-focused case study in an issue of Briefing magazine as well. I'm joined by Vincent Perrin, who is the Regional Vice President of Professional Services at Salesforce UK and Ireland. He's spent 8 years launching the business into new industry verticals prior to legal, including gaming, accountancy, and consulting. And I'm going to start by letting Vincent say a very few words before we get into my interviews. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Richard. Firstly, thank you to everyone for joining today. I know there's a minor event happening later this afternoon. Some of you might have checked the finishing time for that. So we thank you for joining, and I'm looking forward to today's content. As Richard said, look, I'm the Regional Vice President for Law and Professional Services at Salesforce. Don't worry, I'm only here for a brief introduction. Okay, just to check you at the right webinar, we're here today to talk about how you can leverage data for actionable insights, and this ultimately helps drive client value and experience. Quick point of view for myself, look, data is a hot topic. This is nothing new. It's still one of the most topical subjects whenever we're talking to any law firm. And at Salesforce, using and combining data for a unified client view is fundamentally what we do. If you go to many other industries or professions, it's what we're normally turned to for. So lots of companies say, right, we've got lots of data. How do we make better use of it? My view, since I've been working with law firms, is this has been the case and the challenge more than any other profession that Richard mentioned I've worked in. Okay, the time that it takes, the resource to get insight from your data compared to what is expected as table stakes in other industries, there's a huge potential here. And look, there's lots of point solutions, different sets of data and silos that, the benefit and the realization of that by unlocking your data, unleashing it is huge. But you're obviously on this webinar today, so you know that. And I think with that in tow, I'll probably hand over back to Richard so we can hear from Sadie and Bob.
Thanks very much, Vincent. Thank you. And we're going to be talking to you a bit more later, of course. I'm going to first be speaking to Bob, as I say, Bob Hetherington at Weightmans. Bob, now I mentioned in my introduction that you've been head of management information at the firm for over 10 years. I'm not going to make you go back and tell us everything that you've done in that time frame, but if we can look at sort of a reasonable, say, strategic window, perhaps of 2 or 3 years, or if you or more recently, of course, if you've made particular investments more recently, what is it that you've introduced, do you think, that's made the most significant difference to how Weightmans is able to manage and use its data for clients or indeed internally?
Well, I think it's a range of things, Richard, really, and at the core of it for us was getting the basics right, that we sort of recognise that in order to deliver insights to clients, you've got to have the proper building blocks. So the sort of creation of a data warehouse and the centralisation of our data from all the different sources that we have, be it our case management system, finance practice management, CRM systems, HR systems, are all now integrated into the data warehouse, and that has a huge impact on our ability to provide reports to our clients instantaneously online. That one source of the truth idea that's fairly critical when you're reporting across multiple lines of work. So the data warehouse has been fairly integral to that. Mm-hmm. Equally, we've invested in enhanced case management systems where our point of entry of data are able to do data validation, lots of checks and balances, lots of alerts to help drive data accuracy. So we felt that was also fairly crucial. We used to have an older system that provided none of that functionality. That additional emphasis has really helped us in terms of getting that data integrity right and giving clients confidence about the systems you have in place. We've invested in our people heavily. It sometimes goes amiss, doesn't it? It's always about technology, but actually the people. You know, we've created a data science team that had a significant impact on just the language in the business, you know, how we think about data, how we actually analyze it. And that's also in sort of data governance department. So again, recognizing that it isn't just about the tech, you've got to back it up with some sort of analysis and analysts and how you actually monitor and govern the data. And then significantly for us as well, a significant investment for a firm of our size on data visualization and Tableau. So we recognise that it's a combination of factors to provide insights to clients. It isn't just about the pretty graphing, but that's still a really important part of it. We found that we've integrated sort of Tableau and data visualization across all aspects of our business, both client delivery, internally with finance dashboards, just because our experiences for clients internally just is so much more easily digestible. The insights do come easier when you visualize them. We have suites of SSRS standardized reports, but actually the dashboards have more impact instantaneously than anything we've ever done traditionally. So I think all of those factors have really gone into really improving not only the underpinning of what we deliver to clients, but actually how we deliver those insights to them.
Okay, and how recently did those things come into place? I mean, the data warehouse, for example.
Yeah, I mean the warehouse, the case management system is really over the last 4 years, and then Tableau more recently than that. So it is within my span of being, as you said, being at MI since about 2010. Actually, that has all been reasonably in the recent past. A lot of the time up to then was just discussing data and trying to raise awareness across the business about its importance.
So that coincided with a realization that something quite significant needed to change then?
Absolutely. We sort of recognised the way the market was changing. I mean, the market that we are in, very competitive in terms of other firms appreciating the need for this as well. So we recognised we had to do something different. We had to up our game. I think one firm turned up to a tender with iPads and suddenly the horror dawned that we weren't delivering perhaps the data in the way that others were thinking about it. So all of those things caused us to review our strategy and what we needed to do.
Okay, thank you. And I want to focus next on the sort of client-facing element specifically. You talked about visualization there. How is your thinking about exactly how data is presented to clients changing, if it is, and what sort of driving your thinking on that? Is that the demand from the clients, or
it's absolutely the drive from the clients? Yeah, their expectations of what we need to do as a basic core part of our delivery have changed exponentially, really. I mean, even 2 or 3 years ago, it might have been okay to turn up with a dashboard and dazzle them, you know, with a few graphs, but actually now it's that integration of the insight piece as well. So it's that effective combination, isn't it, of the technology you can provide them with, but actually some of the old school things that are still important, which is understanding their business, understanding what they need, talking to them about what data insights are you looking for, and then delivering those via sort of visualization so it's easily digestible, that they can utilize them for sort of upward reporting. They're very interested in benchmarking nowadays. We found in our particular markets, they want to understand what are we doing across a market, not just in their particular sort of instructions that we receive from them, and how then you can visualize that and integrate it. And yeah, that's been the most significant change, I think, that they're not allowing us to simply do basic reports anymore. They want us to help drive improvements constantly, and the focus on that is via the data. So the old anecdotal thing still has its place and it needs to integrate into the insight, but fundamentally they want to say, well, how is the data underpinning this? What are you seeing in the data? What does open source data look like against your own market? And they're expecting us to deliver that.
Okay, and they want to use data that you're helping them to surface, whether from within your firm or, as you say, externally to drive their own strategies.
Absolutely, and also to integrate their own data if they're able to provide it to us. As an expectation that if we're showing our trend analysis, can we take their data into our systems, which we can with the data warehouse, and then actually report that back to them. And then also the accessibility, you know, ease of access rather than having to wait for reports. Can you provide them online? Can they be just web-based so that it gives them that, you know, instant access to it rather than having to rely upon any sort of predicted timetable when they might receive them?
Okay, yeah. You alluded at the beginning there to the fact that, you know, people are a challenge as much as choosing and implementing and ensuring that the technology works as it should. To what extent do those sort of cultural challenges that we've heard about in briefing so much over the years, when it comes to getting lawyers to behave in certain ways, how much do they still persist when it comes to data, and what are you doing about that if you can?
Well, I'd love to say that we'd overcome them completely, but that would be a fib. I think they still remain almost the most significant part of what we're delivering. The technology part and the pressing a button to produce a report is almost the easiest side of it. Actually, it's the understanding of you've got to have the basics, you've got to capture your data accurately, and everyone's involved in that. So, you know, if I had £1 for every time a lawyer said, oh, you know, I didn't go to university to do data inputting, that type of attitude, you still get that. I think there is a sea change. I think people are starting to understand more the importance of it, and that's how we're trying to address it. It's a bit of a multi-pronged approach, so I expect, you know, would be what other firms adopt, that culturally we try and show what the benefit is. So as a data services department, we're constantly out in the business telling success stories around data where we've really delighted the client with something that's proved to be of benefit to them that then can be utilized for other clients. Obviously, with lawyers, if you can sell them on the client experience and what it can help them with, that's a significant part of the battle. So we do a lot of that. We try and make the data collection part of it as simple and intuitive as possible within reason. So integrate, for us, it's an integration into our case management system. So it's linked to documents. So if you use data in one place, it can actually be used in another. So the lawyers see that they're getting a real benefit from data inputting. Okay. But we also integrate it into our performance management as well. So data collection and MI completion is actually seen as one of the core outputs of our lawyers and one of their key performance metrics. So there's an understanding it isn't just an adjunct to what you're doing, it's part of an integral part of what you do as a lawyer. And that again, I wouldn't say it's immediately everything's fantastic, but those levers are all helping us, I think, over time to really make people understand data and then capture it in the way that we need them to.
I see. Okay, thank you. we always, in these webinars, as you can imagine, at some point touch on the circumstances which no longer seem quite as strange that we now find ourselves in, but did once. Have the circumstances of working through the pandemic changed your thinking on any of what we've talked about here? How you've been improving data processes, delivering data to clients? Is that calling for something new to happen again?
I think, ironically, I'd love to pretend that I foresaw a global pandemic. I clearly didn't, but we'd gone quite a long way towards remote working, paperless offices. So in reality, the delivery of what we do from a data perspective hasn't significantly changed. I think what has changed is the speed of response requests from the clients. I think it's heightened from the clients and awareness of what they want from us from data, what's going on with our matters, even around specifically COVID. You know, how has that impacted the insurance claims, for instance, around delays, you know, information that they require from us about how we're managing our business. I think that has definitely caused the data requirements to increase. So not a significant change in terms of the actual day-to-day for us as a business, but certainly I think the expectations and requirements, it's focused the mind from a client perspective.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Finally, before we move on to Sadie at Reed Smith, where do you see the most potential to extract greater value here in the long term? Maybe sort of internally as well as for your clients, as I'm sure that would be part of your answer.
It would really. I mean, again, a number of different things. I think data standards are clearly starting to gain traction and understanding, say across the insurance industry, we act for about the need for standardization of data. I think that's something that will come and that firms will need to understand and be involved in. For us, it's around use of unstructured data as well. Obviously, the limitations on the insights you provide to the client to an extent are often in what you can capture in a structured way. I think clearly a lot of firms now are making headway with use of unstructured data. I think that's fairly integral, how you'll be able to extract that from documents and then put it to use. So data analytics and predictive model and machine learning, again, those are things that we started to utilize as others will have done. And I think that will only accelerate. I think clients are interested at, certainly from our perspective, at how you're going to harness these new technologies in line with the data and deliver something different and make an impact to my business. So I think those for me are the sort of key features that we need to focus on in the near future.
Yeah. Thanks, Bob. Thank you.
Great.
That's a great summary, I think, of where Weightmans is. I'm going to speak to Sadie now and then welcome you back again to chat some more in a bit. So yes, now moving across to Sadie Baron, who, as I mentioned at the beginning, is Chief Marketing Officer at Reed Smith. And if Bob was a producer of lots of data, Sadie, we could say, is a consumer of a huge amount of it in her role for business development and marketing purposes. So Sadie, you listened to what Bob was saying there, of course. What are your top challenges as a user of data in the business, and what does that mean for sort of what you want to see in a data strategy and what you're putting together as part of the data strategy, if that's part of your role?
Yeah, I mean, Bob touched on some of the similar points that we have around data. I mean, my overwhelming response is that word, being overwhelmed by data. I forget what the statistic is, and I meant to look it up, and I apologize to everyone, but it is a phenomenal amount of data. It's something ridiculous that we have, like we could go around the world 13 times if you lined up all our data piece by piece. And that's a challenge to us, because actually what we're selling in many ways is the experience of what we do every day, be that kind of transactional, be that industry, or be that even geography related. And getting to that data is what's so challenging for us. And then having got to it, interpreting it in such a way that you can use it meaningfully for business development purposes. So it is a challenge. I think we've got a lot better at it. We're really lucky. We've got a phenomenal sort of data management, enterprise data management strategy process. A really big part of that has been about collaboration between all the key owners, if you like, of the data. Clearly, I'm a consumer of it, We also own quite a lot of data. We produce quite a lot of data as marketers, particularly on activities of interactions with clients. Then you have the knowledge management piece. So, kind of who's got the experience, where does that work? You have the financial piece, and you've got to knit all of that together. And then, one of the most important people in our organization and the person that actually owns the data management strategy is our CIO, because we've got to have the technology to knit this all together. Another real challenge, I think, for firms of any notable size, and Bob did touch on this a little bit as well, is that legacy of how we've developed as organizations. We've got multiple systems, multiple platforms, multiple sources, and trying to simplify that, get them to talking to each other, getting them to integrate, and then being able to extract those relevant data points is really, really important. And I think the final thing that I kind of agree with Bob a little bit on, we may talk about this a bit more as well, is everybody in the firm needs to understand that we're actually in the business of data these days. It comes through the legal lens, but really everybody has got a role in data. From every email that we send, from every phone call that we make, from every RFP that we receive, from every matter that we have, they're all data points. And I don't think people understand that enough. I still think there's very much a feeling, and I smile when I say that data sits on top of the day job. Like BD sits on top of the day job. You've got to the end of being a lawyer for the day and you think, oh, I need to do some BD now. And
that's the point that Bob made, wasn't it? That
exactly.
They didn't study to do that. Yeah,
correct. And I completely agree with him on that. Part of our challenge, I think, as owners of these enterprise data management strategies, is how do we embed those touch points, those data extractions, that valuable data as part of everyone's day jobs? How do we make it important enough to them? And how do you demonstrate the value? So.
Okay, yeah. In terms of that, I realise you're not the CIO, but in terms of that technology piece, is that something that the firm is still working on, in sort of doing all that joining up, or do you think that that's something that you've already achieved? If you can say.
I think it's definitely work in progress still, but I think we've got a long way down the road. We've got something now called the Financial Intelligence Unit, which has joined up a huge amount of our data. Bob used a phrase that we use as well, one version of the truth. When I took over as CMO about 5 years ago, it was one of the first projects that I collaborated on with my other chiefs, which was, how do we make sure that we're providing management information to the firm that really comes from one source? And that source is accurate, because it was a little bit of depended on who you asked as to what answer that you got and what lens that you got it through. So we've done a lot of work around that. We've got some great tools like Tableau and others in our midst. We've got data analysts now that we didn't have years ago, whose job is to help us really provide both the management information, but also the client insights piece. Because we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that an awful lot of data that we're asked for, certainly from my perspective, is client-driven data these days. So how do we get that out, and how do we make sure that we're providing accurate data? And I'm pretty confident by what we have and how we do it now as a firm.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. In terms of the things that you focus on most from within your role, how do you choose, and what have you chosen sort of change, tackle, whatever verb you like, as priorities?
Bully, that might be another way of describing it. No, so look, I do have some decisions over some of the technology, and we can talk a little bit about that later on. But really, it's the behavioural mindset piece around data. And we should be sensitive to that when you think about a partner. Their whole world is their black book in many ways, their contacts, how they drive it. So when you go piling in there and you talk about the need to share that data, you can often get some resistance from people. So my tactic on this is, and one that I've been heard to say many times, is I'm always like, okay, fine, partner X, I completely understand where you're coming from, why you don't want to necessarily put your data onto the CRM database, in my instance. However, what that does now mean is that you cannot shout at me when your contacts are marketed to, because other members of this firm might also know your contacts and they have put them on the database, and therefore they are going to be marketing to them, and you're not going to know about that. So that's been one tactic that I've used in the past. Sort of, you know, a little bit of carrot, a little bit of stick around it. But it's important that they understand that, you know, you cannot protect a contact. Now, you can put lots of data management strategies around contacts that are very sensitive, and I understand that, and we do that. But equally, you know, if they're not in there, I can't be held responsible for what might happen to them, because I don't know. Another little trick I used a few years ago is, again, this idea of embedding it in people's day jobs. When the economic crisis happened, 2008, 2009, I used that quite shamelessly as an opportunity to say, you know, if you don't put a contact report into the CRM database, your expenses won't get paid. Because I don't think that it's a big ask of anyone, if you're spending your firm's money, to put a really simple, Sadie met Richard for a coffee on the 28th of June. It was a really simple process that phenomenally improved the uptake and usage of our data and of our CRM system. It didn't take long for it to really embed itself. And it also then became a point where finance didn't have to even keep checking that these contact reports were in there. You know, we've moved on to beyond it. It just became a behavior in the firm. So I think thinking about things like that, how you can get people to engage with a process that actually gives you valuable data without it being onerous, or it having, you know, something they really want, and in that case is them getting their money back, I think can be really useful.
Okay, yeah, I think you mentioned before also that you know, one can perhaps obsess too much about hygiene as well, data hygiene, and that in fact you might want to sort of pick your battles there as well.
Absolutely. Again, my experience on this, and it's a wonderful hindsight moment. I would thoroughly recommend only ever cleansing and enhancing, and that's the point as well, data that really matters to you. So in my first CRM project that I did, I cleaned everything, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of records, and quickly realized that the time it had taken to clean it had gone out of date, and actually it was populating a database with a lot of information that would never be used. So now we only clean our top 250 clients' data, but actually more importantly, we went another step and we looked at who we didn't know, why we didn't know them. We found out as much as we could about them, and we populated the database with that. So then you're opening up your database, or you're providing data insights on data that really matters to the firm. And I think that's a really crucial point. You know, don't boil the ocean. Be quite clear about what it is that you think is going to provide real value to the firm, and then really focus on how you input it, mine it, and enhance it.
In terms of the time it takes there, are you looking at, or have you looked at any opportunities to automate the way that data is moved between systems or collected in the first place? And there's obviously lots of technology out there that can potentially help you with that.
Yeah, we do. So, I mean, we've got various tools, as I've already mentioned, Tableau being one of them, where, you know, we are automating as much of that process as we can. We have something called Reed Smith Global Solutions as well, and that's a technology-led delivery process for clients, but also we use them internally as well. So we're automating as much as we can in order to make sure that the data quality is really accurate. Because there's always a human error. One thing that we did is that we implemented a firm-wide taxonomy, and that took some work. There was many of us involved in that, but it goes all the way from new business intake all the way through to CRM and BD, and it means that there's just kind of one way of describing industry or practice areas. And yeah, we've had some unhappy people because they're like very niche specialism perhaps isn't in there in the way that they'd want it. But what it really did was it helped us to be able to mine our data really effectively. And then we've been able to automate off the back of that because there's sort of standardization within it. So yeah, we do quite a lot of automation around data inputting, and also, how we capture data from BD activities and then feed it back in. That's all an automated process for us. It broke recently. And it drove my team absolutely insane while we had to manually look after it for a little while. So yeah, I'm a big fan of automation and making sure. The other thing that, is a bit of hindsight from my perspective, we're not integrated to Outlook for our contact data. I don't push for that point. And it's back to the point I made about having data that really matters and data that's really valuable. The trouble with an Outlook contact book, I don't know, mine's probably, 12 years old or something. I've imported contacts across, it's out of date. You end up populating your database with quite a lot of rubbish. Yeah. So I think we've never turned that on in either of the big 2 CRM projects that I've worked on. I know other firms have done it really successfully, but from our perspective, we haven't found the need to do that yet. We've found that actually maintaining and managing the really key data has been more critical than importing everybody's Outlook contact books. And I'm probably making Vinny right now sort of spin on his chair, but that's just been my personal experience of kind of being careful about integration and automation of feeding of data.
Oh, so he'll have a moment to talk about that a bit later. I have to ask you about the sort of the client-facing aspect of all of this as well. The sorts of information that clients are asking you for, and how you're setting about meeting the demand for that. Something that Bob was talking about, wasn't he? About sort of benchmarking, for example. But are there similar or other things that clients want from you?
So we come under a lot of pressure as a team to produce client reports. The main ones we get are kind of like monthly summaries where clients are to a client's format. We're expected to provide everything from kind of matter management information through to how many events they've been asked to, and also really importantly, diversity and inclusion information. That's been a huge part of the reporting that's really come through in the last 2 to 3 years. What are we doing? How diverse the team is, and what projects we may have been working on for them as well. So we do a huge amount of very tailored, very bespoke client reports every month. We generally also get quite a lot of data requests for DE&I summaries from clients that perhaps we're not doing the financial information for in the same way. So there's sort of annual surveys of DE&I that we do for them. There's now an uptick on a little bit of ESG. That seems to now be kind of people wanting to know more about ESG policies that we have and how that's impacting them because of the regulation reporting that they've got, and us being a supplier to them. We also do try and proactively report to our clients on trends that we're seeing perhaps coming through on their matters, how we can provide sort of more information to them around project management aspects of what we're doing, the sort of data analytics, any heat maps that we're seeing with a client. We're seeing a particular peak in labour and employment cases in Germany for them. How can we dig into that? How can we make, do a partnership conversation with them about, why is that happening, using our data to help inform the clients on possibly things that, they're not seeing because they're super busy and focused perhaps in a global role. So that's some of the things that we try and do as well with the data that we get asked for by clients. But the DE&I piece and the monthly summaries, they're the biggest requests for data from our perspective, other than RFPs, which I won't go into. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. A final one before we bring everyone back together to talk about some of these things a bit more. We've seen a couple of potential new developments when it comes to sort of competition for talent. I think, obviously, the way that we're working is different, could be different again in future. Also, salaries, changing as well, as we were saying. How useful is data? It is not a leading question when it comes to sort of your hiring and staffing decisions.
Oh, it's absolutely vital. Like many firms, we actually partner with an external organisation that does a lot of data mining of kind of all the moves in the markets at all levels. And it really helps us think about the strategy for hiring, where we've got a gap, what might be a sort of likely target firm or three that we could see whether we might be able to attract talent from. Like I said, I'm not giving away any trade secrets here because many law firms use tools like that. We obviously also track internally our talent from a diversity perspective, but also kind of, where we've got gaps, where we've got work allocation tools, how we can really develop our own talent, how we can make sure our associates are staying busy across the board. So you cannot begin to express how important data is in the management of your talent, whether that's from a recruitment perspective or whether that's from a kind of keeping people busy, which leads to better morale and better talent retention, because you can kind of say to an associate, we're going to be able to keep your realization and your utilization high because we've got this great work allocation tool. It means that we can make sure you're plugged in on projects where we really need you, and virtual working has just accelerated that. The barriers you used to have to associates perhaps only getting to work with the partners who sat around the corner from them has gone. And we're really seeing a huge improvement through our work allocation tool. And then again, I'd love to think that we're being terribly innovative here. The Big Four have been doing this for donkey's years, but I think it's going to be a really, really big step forward in terms of talent retention, because associates and council and even I guess even FSPs could see a scenario where there's huge opportunity for collaboration. And opportunities to learn and work with different clients.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sadie. Loads to think about there, I'm sure. We're going to bring Vincent and Bob back again now, so that we can all have a chat about some other aspects and perhaps pick up on some of those things that people have talked about already as well. And this is now also the opportunity for you watching to ask any of your questions. As I mentioned at the beginning, please don't be shy. Just add them into the Q&A and I will get to them and indeed prioritize them over my own. So Vincent, you haven't answered any questions yet, so I'm going to come to you first. What are your sort of the highlights for you from what we've heard, if they sort of correspond to things that you've been looking at when it comes to Salesforce's involvement in the data question? And are there any things that you think that other firms that are watching sort of might not know about how they could tackle some of these challenges from Salesforce's perspective?
There's a lot there. Let me start with highlights. I think obviously working with Bob and Sadie, a lot of what they've said we've heard. I think what resonates for me is the can you still hear me?
I can. I missed you just for a couple of words. Yeah.
It's the cultural element, or the I don't want to say politics, but it's the value and maybe the lack of belief in the value that can be delivered from the likes of Sadie or Bob from the data when it's done properly. I think Bob's example of hadn't seen as much change or value until they'd actually built and delivered some of the tools, and Sadie's comments about having to talk about the value of putting that contact in the CRM so you don't market to them, don't just think about yourself. I think that's something that I come across, or we come across daily with law firms, is that bit of helping getting all the different stakeholders on the same bus, for lack of a better phrase. The value is there. It's almost the belief of, if they haven't seen it before, they need to see it before they'll buy into it. And look, we're really pleased to obviously have Bob and Sadie on this call today, but a lot of our customers that use Salesforce, I think that's once they start on the journey, that's where we see that it's actually quite quick. That time to value is quicker than a lot of either partners or stakeholders in law firms think it will be. So it's almost a case of if you can gain their trust and let them give you that opportunity, we're seeing quite a lot of benefit being delivered by our customers.
Yeah.
What was the second part, Richard?
I was asking if there are aspects either of what we've talked about already, or other data management challenges that you think law firms might be able to tackle faster or more efficiently than they might imagine, in terms of sort of the investment it takes to tackle them.
Yeah, and I think it will feel like I'm going off on a tangent, but bear with me. I think one of the first problems that we have at Salesforce when we're talking to law firms is to explain to them that we're not just a CRM, although they will look at Salesforce as a CRM. You've got Bob today talking about using Salesforce or Tableau, and not how he's using Salesforce as a CRM. And you've got Sadie talking about, client engagement and making use of, great comment from Sadie about the swarms of data that you've got going 13 times around the world. Look, neither have come to Salesforce and said, can you replace our CRM? Well, in a way it might have started there. But I think the main is it's a platform. And I think what really resonates is you don't need all your data in one place. You just need to unlock the data that is of use to you. I think Sadie said it, and Bob does it on a daily basis, to make better use of it, to get these insights for the questions that you're asking. And Salesforce as a platform can do a number of different things, but it is never going to be the first. I went into one meeting, it was like, we're not going to replace everything with Salesforce. And I was like, we're not even talking about that. We're just saying you have lots of data, and there's an easy way to visualize that, or in that case, it was easy way to access it and unlock it, to unleash the benefit of that data. And that might be through a CRM, it might be through marketing, it might be just through visualization, like Bob mentioned. Please don't pigeonhole your view of what you think, or how tough you think it will be to get insight out of your data, because you've heard from two great speakers today that are getting it right now.
I suppose another question, Vincent, is in my introduction to the beginning, I mentioned, of course, that you have worked in lots of different sectors, introducing some of these ideas. What might law firms be surprised about, or might they be able to take from the way that other sectors that you've worked with or are working with are sort of tackling this?
Yeah, I'll answer that in a weird way. I had to give a review back to my own leadership that asked about, what are the learnings from the law profession over the last 2 years of helping with the go-to-market and changing our approach. And we've invested heavily in law at Salesforce now to make out-the-box solutions ready. But what I've learned is other industries. Let me pick one: gaming. We picked, I won't name brands, but the gambling industry. We picked the biggest gambling firm, and we revolutionized their client experience. And then a lot of the other gambling companies wanted to be like them. So it was almost easier for Salesforce. It was, here's the perfect client experience. Would you like it too? What we've learned in law firms is, even on today, we've got Bob working within a subset or an offering which is different to the challenges that Sadie has. And our naivety to begin with was, look, here's a great client experience, a unified client view, getting all your data visualized in one view to make all partners look great in front of customers, make better decisions, look how good this is. But actually, there are intricacies to that. And what we've learned is it is different for Sadie to Bob. It'll be different to Sadie than it is to some of the other top 50 law firms. And I suppose that's probably the long way of me saying it's not straightforward. The challenges are unique, but there are a lot of similarities to every other industry I've worked in, which is, if you look at us as a platform and you look at what you're trying to achieve, we've done it before. I think I'd almost say in the law profession, a lot of people think Salesforce isn't law specific. It's not legal. That's mainstream. But actually the challenges, i.e. combining to get a single view of your client, that's the same challenge that, I don't know, a Burberry has in retail, that, that Sophos have in IT, or Bentley have in the motor industry. They want one view of their client, and that's what Salesforce actually does. So in the law profession, we're learning every day about little intricacies, but I think that's the bit that I would say is we aren't, we're now obviously we've got a lot of legal clients, but we're experts in doing the challenge that you're facing, is what I'd say.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Vincent. I'm going to come back to Bob and Sadie. We've talked about the people aspect and obviously getting people to change, but I wanted to ask you a little bit about the change management involved in some of these really big projects that you've overseen in the last 2 or 3 years. You know, what have you had to change about the way you change, if you have had to, Sadie?
So I think change management is one of those things that gets overlooked, the importance of it. Everyone looks at the technology, everyone looks at the data, everyone looks at the inputting and the quality aspects, and they just forget about the behavioural change piece that you're actually trying to push through in a beast of an organisation. And you know, Vinny made me smile about, you know, it is different. We've all got common challenges, but we've all got different DNA as a firm, and so certain things resonate with certain firms in different ways. And that change management piece is really, it really is so important, and you can't start it soon enough. Right. In my experience, you know, the decision on the technology is so far down the line after you should be thinking about your change management behavior, what you want to achieve, your goals, why, the value, the sell-in. The top-down approach is super important on any of these projects, to have very senior management buy-in and support. And then, you know, almost the technology, the data cleansing, the logistics, the coding, whatever else you need, it should be further down the line. And it can, if you get it wrong, it can absolutely stop you in your tracks. When I first joined Reed Smith, we'd gone out and got a particular system, and there was just no change management put in place around it. You know, it was, you know, we're buying the technology, we're launching it, here you go, it's out of the box type stuff, and it failed miserably, to the point where I couldn't even consider it as a possible option, even though it's been vastly improved since those days, because the history, the name sits with all the partners in their brains, and I you know, unless I want to sign my own P45, there was just no point in me even looking at it. So I don't think you can underestimate the change management aspect of it. And the only other comment I'd make is around the importance of communication as part of change management as well. It's one thing to consider what needs to change, why it needs to change, but then communicating that. I basically bore people to death on the same subject all the time, because you've got no choice. You can't say it once. You have to say it 100,000 times before it really resonates.
Even the rule of 3 is not enough. No. Okay, Bob, how about you? Yeah,
a similar experience, really. Sort of borne the battle scars, really, of failing to do change management correctly. I mean, to be fair, when I started out on the data journey, I was probably a team of 1, so perhaps I hadn't given it the thought I needed to. I think we've become more aware of how fatally you can undermine any project if you don't deal with it properly. I mean, the structure of law firms as well, with sort of equity partnerships and senior people in positions, can be a challenge if you don't bring them with you, and how their ability to undermine what you're trying to deliver. I think the other thing we found was don't make assumptions about the fact that people are working as you expect they are. I think when we started, well, this will work because everybody uses the case management system, and then suddenly you realise someone's running matters out of Outlook or Word, and I think that was a real experience for us. Don't make assumptions, understand what the actual position is, and then work from there. I thought that was fairly critical for us.
Interesting. Yeah, I wanted to ask you actually, Bob, also about to expand on something you mentioned in our earlier chat, that you'd invested a lot in data sort of insight, data analytics team, sort of new talent in that area. Can you tell us a little bit about the extent to which you've done that, and sort of plans for expanding that further, if there are any, and also sort of just generally how you're helping lawyers to, to use the data in conversations with their clients and when they're going out trying to win business?
Yeah, I mean, we had across our business pockets of data analytics and data governance, but they were siloed in individual areas. It hadn't actually been planned. So we integrated everybody into one data services sort of department, which was fairly important, because then you obviously had the exchange of ideas and cross-pollination, and you were able to standardize. But then what we also realized was that we, a bit like Sadie said, almost swimming in data, but what we're actually doing with it. So we realized that we need to try and standardize the view to the clients within reason. Each client's different, but we realized that, using Tableau or, what are the insights we're trying to deliver and can we standardize those? And then the data science development was very much around the realization that, again, we got all of this historic data, but what were we really doing with it? Could we actually use predictive modeling in particular markets where it was really of value, particularly in sort of defendant insurance? Could you take that data and use those particular set of skills? And I think, it's challenging for me day to day because my background's legal. So talking to data scientists is a challenge. They live in and talk a particular language. I'm probably Googling more than I'm talking to them at times. But what I realized was they are moving the goalpost for us as an organization. You know that when the board starts talking about predictive modeling and statistical models, that you're making some headway. So I think that's been really quite interesting for us. I think that from our point of view, the intention is to increase that, to look at our data in a different way, and then how we can work with the clients on that who are equally looking at that area. So that's where we are now.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Sadie, is there much sort of demystifying of data work happening at Reed Smith? How are you helping lawyers to get their heads around it if it's not their forte?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I mean, we've got some really, really talented lawyers. We've actually got a team based in Austin in the life sciences area, and they blow my mind with what they are doing for clients using technology and data to help improve outcomes around cases. And our challenge with them is simply scalability. We know we've got to be slightly careful how we try and sell them because there's only a smallish team of them and it takes a while to train these people up. But they are a mixture of lawyers and data scientists and technology experts. I think it is about trying to use data to prove value to how it can make a difference. Bob touched on something that that we look at as well. When you think about what a client is challenged with, cost predictability, time predictability, they want to know that information. So if you can use data in such a way that you can provide that to the lawyer, who can then provide it to the client, that's a win. They get it all of a sudden. They understand why it's so important that actually they're entering their time, because at the end of the day, it means that, we can analyze it in such a way and we can now start to provide you with the average time of an M&A deal at this value in this location, in this industry. And we can talk about costs to the client, all of which I think is super important. You've got to make it worthwhile. I get told off for this sort of stuff all the time, but I am outspoken. Our client alert open rate is disastrous. We sent last year, thanks to the pandemic, in excess of 2.8 million client alerts. Usually we send around about 1 million, but with the pandemic, like everybody else, we just piled in there. Our open rate is less than 2%. And when you think about the time a partner, an associate, a trainee spends on crafting a client alert that we know isn't being opened, isn't making traction with clients, and how they could actually spend that time doing something far more effective, possibly just to a handful of clients, and get a better result. That's another way of using data and data analytics to really improve a situation, because there's an awful lot. And don't get me wrong, client alerts have their place, and we have some open rates which are phenomenal, but actually the mailing list is very targeted, and that's a sort of quality versus quantity message that we're working through right now. But our open rate is 2% on 2.8 million. Yeah, that's not a sum that I particularly like doing in my head, and it's one that I'm very intent on improving. So I think you've got to find a way to make the data relevant in that moment of time, in when you're talking to either an individual lawyer or a group of lawyers. So I tend to use the client alert one when I'm in a partner meeting or a group meeting, because I know there's a number of people in the audience who are tasked with producing these client alerts. I tend to use the sort of individual analytics point. How can we help the client with your issue when I'm on a one-on-one situation? And also, you know, we just responding to clients and then sharing what we're doing with clients as well is really important. There's always a lot of synergies across industry for certain clients. If we produce a report for a bank, you know, making sure the other client partners of other banks get that data and say, hey, if this is happening with X, then, you know, maybe you should be thinking about it with your client. Using it in those sorts of ways is how you win their hearts and minds. Going in and talking data to them leaves them largely cold, in my view.
Thanks, Sadie. That's some great practical points there. That's really useful. We have had a question come in, so I'm going to throw this to you quite quickly. How do you start the process of getting a handle on the data that your firm might be swimming in? You talk about the volume of it that might be lost in. Which business function should sort of take the lead of that initially, at least, is the question. Is it IT or is it your job, Sadie?
Oh God. It's like the hot potato. You all throw it amongst each other. I promise you. I tried ever so hard to get my chief knowledge officer to take the CRM system, and she was having none of it. I don't think there is. I think you have to own your own element of it, but collaboration is absolutely key. If you have to choose an owner of the data, then I think probably our choice has been our CIO, because that's where the enterprise strategy sits. But we meet, there are four of us, you know, CFO, CIO, Chief Knowledge Officer and myself, and we meet on a monthly basis to really talk about things. We have something called the Demand Council, which is actually not just about data, it's about technology purchases and technology systems, because that's the other thing in a law firm. You know, you find somebody who's suddenly got their brother-in-law who's got this amazing system, and you've got to have a demo and we need to buy it yesterday, and before you know it, we signed up to it and we're like, where the hell did this come from? So to stop that, we have something called the Demand Council, which is basically the four of us. And I think, you know, come at it individually, but then make sure you sit down and collaborate and really talk about it. Lucy Dillon, the CKO, and I, we spend so much time talking about the same data set, but from a different perspective. And so I don't think there's a one size fits all answer to that, I'm afraid. I think it depends on your firm and it depends on what you're trying to achieve. But your enterprise data management strategy, I think, probably sits with your CIO. Okay. They won't like me for that. That's okay, what I think.
I'd only add, look, absolutely everything that Sadie said. We call it Salesforce shared ownership. Right. There might be the budget that will be held normally. It has to for financing with one part of the business, either BD or IT. However, when it comes to actually the success of anything, be it CRM, analytics, it is shared ownership across the firm, because otherwise you're just going to get another silo of a system that's only used in one facet of the firm. So we're calling it shared, but it's what we've done in other industries. It must be owned by in other industries, we say the business and IT. In law, we say it's got to be owned across the firm.
Yes. I mean, when we spoke, Vincent, you were talking about IT, BD, and the partners as well. And Bob, I guess in your case it's you, is it?
Unfortunately, it was. Yeah, I was walking down a corridor one day and they said we need somebody to. I think though I echo the points, irrespective of who actually takes that overall command. The collective collaborative experience is the vital piece, and then once you've done that, establishing that data governance structure and ownership on an ongoing basis is fairly critical. Okay.
Well, thank you. I think that's a good point to round up and say goodbye. So thank you very much to Sadie at Reed Smith, Sadie Baron, Bob Hetherington at Weightmans, and Vincent Perrin, of course, from Salesforce, for speaking to me today. Thank you all for watching and listening as well. And I hope you'll join us again for another session soon.